Hello and welcome to episode 99 of Just Keep Writing.
A podcast for writers.
By writers.
To keep you writing.
I'm Marshall.
I'm Nick.
I'm Brent.
I'm LP.
And I'm Will.
All right, gentlemen, I missed last time, and I'm not upset about it at all. I'm so glad we're all here hanging out. Did that sound sarcastic?
I'm salty. I wanted to hug you.
Yeah, that's right. I was like, wait a minute, what? And then
remember I wasn't here for the live version last time.
Listen.
Yes.
In front of our one studio audience, Sarah. Thank you, Sarah.
Shout out to Sarah.
And it's very unfortunate because it's the second time you've had to miss last second to meet our lovely Brent and LP in person.
Yes. So I'm yet to meet Brent and LP in person, and eventually I will. But it was a heck of an adventure. But that's a story for another day. Maybe we'll tell it on episode 100. But this week we're picking up for Never Say You Can't Survive.
Yep.
Section 2, led by our illustrious Brent. What you got, buddy?
Illustrious. All right. So section 2 is either the section that so it basically talks about what's a story and how do you find one. I feel like this is either a part of the process where people either have a whole lot of fun or they absolutely hate it. Like I know writers who fall into both camps. Like they love finding new things. They love trying to find a story. And you have other writers that's like trying to find something to write and stick with. It's like pulling their eyeballs out. So yeah, so I think it's going to be fun. I think it'll be fun for either person. Like, cause there's a lot in here that Charle Jane talks about. And as always, this book just has so much information in it. We can't cover it all in a single episode. So I'm going to hit on some highlights. We're going to have some discussion and we'll see what we get out of it. So right off the bat in section 2, the first chapter is called Don't Be Afraid to Go on Lots of First Dates with Story Ideas. So essentially, Charle Jane says that, think of a brand new story idea as if you're going on a first date. There's not a lot of pressure. There's not a lot of, it could be, I don't know. I'm not even going to try to justify the metaphor. I'm going to move right into letting us say how we feel about it. So how do you feel about the concept of new stories as first dates? I'm going to start with Nick.
I love it because it makes sense. And I'm going to say it makes sense because I have written the same short story 4 different times now. And on the 4th or 5th iteration, I finally know what I'm doing with it and how many more dates I want with it. So it's a great concept. Like really like a first date, you're getting to know something on a very surface level. It takes many more dates to dive into there. So I personally like it.
Okay. I want to actually, I really wanted, I want to hear what LP has to say about this one, because I know on your Instagram, you post these little snippets about people talking about dating in LA and how, and how god awful it can be. So, what is your thoughts on the concept of a new story idea as a first date?
I am very happy that this works for other people. I'm very much aware that it doesn't work for me.
That's why I'm happy I mentioned the 2 kinds of people, because I was like, I know it's not going to work for everyone.
I come to an idea and I usually have like, I don't stop at like, oh, what's the speculative element, right? And so like, I come to an idea and I'm like, okay, cool. And then I kind of cut off all of the options so that it's streamlined into a thing. So at least in my head, part of it is kind of written, which cuts down on the writing time, allegedly. But yeah, like I could never.
Okay. Yeah. And I'm so glad I mentioned beforehand the 2 kinds of people that might get something out of this, because I know that there's writers who just are not going to be serial daters like this. All right. Well, you're from another first date mecca, I guess, New York City. So how do you feel about this concept of new story ideas as first dates?
So then it means that my first date with the story will last 10 minutes and then I'm like, I'm done with you. I kind of like that. I think it can work. Like my first dates usually, I mean, 9 times out of 10, they're 10 minutes long because I'm like, okay, this isn't feeling it. But story wise, it's also something that could be like um, when you're brainstorming and you're just trying to like come up with ideas and start like maybe a couple pages of a short story or maybe even a novel and be like, you know what? Okay, I'm going to put that away. I'm going to try something different. I started a lot of them like that, and that wound up to be the book I'm writing now. I never thought I'd write that book, but it just clicked.
See, I like that. I kind of echo some of my thoughts. But before I get on that, Marshall, how do you feel about this idea of first dates and story ideas?
I don't know. I can see it working for people. I kind of in the camp of like, all right, well, if I'm getting to the point where I'm writing it, I want to do something with it. You know what I mean? So like, I don't like the metaphor of the first date thing because it feels like then I'm at the like, well, I'm just like dating to date. Like I like having ideas, but once I commit to write something, I feel like I want to stay with the idea because I know I could do something with it at some point. I don't want to just give up on it. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I don't know, the metaphor doesn't all the way work for me. I get where she's saying, and I get why it does work for some people. And I was also a little jealous because I think she said something along the lines of, I have lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of ideas or something like that. And I'm like, I have some ideas. I don't have that many ideas. And I kind of want to do something with the ideas I have. You know what I'm saying? So
Okay,
people have
I
stuff
feel
to
that.
say.
I feel
Okay.
that. All right. Ooh, dang! Everybody's popping off.
Okay.
All
Go
right.
ahead, boys.
I think Nick was first. Nick, you go.
So I feel like I view it different than you guys. I'm viewing it as a first date is in like you're taking your story idea and you're going on a date. You're gonna go see and explore things. If you want to go out and keep exploring that, the way you made it sound, Marshall, I'm like, it almost felt like you were seeing it as like you had to keep going on a first date over and over again. Where I'm like, no, like you
No.
got to take that story idea and then
Okay.
go on a first date and get to know it more. So maybe like, am I?
No, I think I know what you're saying. And I get that's probably how it sounded. But my thing is like, if I'm interested in somebody, I want it to be more than a first date. You know what I'm saying? I'm not a big first
But you got to have
dater.
a first date, right?
No, I get it, dude. But I'm saying like I haven't had that many first dates. This might say something about me, but I like fall quickly and I want to stay with that person. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, you're
Just-
so cute, Marshall. I just want to
So
pinch your cheeks.
Oh God. See, this is why I don't talk to you people.
No, this is. I mean, no, but I like that perspective though, because this probably is a different perspective. You know, if you haven't had that many first dates, like your perspective of that idea would be different. All right, well, you had your hand up. I mean,
I'm just saying, like, I'm a hoe, so of course I want to go as many first dates as possible. So I'm game. That's all.
All right, LP, you had yours up too, so I'm gonna.
Yeah, I mean, look, you can definitely like take an idea and date it around. I agree with that 100%. I think the thing for me is I'm not going to find more than two ways to address this story that speak to like my aesthetic, like the way that I like to write and the things I like to write. And like it takes so long for me to dig down into a version of that I think is resonant for me and hopefully resonant for someone else that I like going around in that way. I don't know. No, there's no way. But I respect everyone else's opinion, allegedly.
I mean, I'm kind of with Will. Like, I want to just go. I mean, I have like, I guess I'm like Charle Jane too. I just have so many ideas, and sometimes I'm terrible as a person. I guess maybe when it comes to story dating, because it'll be like I'm out here in a relationship with this story, but you know, I need a couple of first dates to like revitalize me to make me feel young again. I guess because like I'll play around with other ideas while I still have a big idea. Like, so I don't know. I'm totally a proponent of this method of just like. Write it down as it comes, go on a date with it, see where it goes. If it doesn't go anywhere, hold on to it. Maybe later on you can invite all 5 of them over and y'all can figure out and have some fun and figure out if you can make something out of it. I mean, how many stories? I mean, I've had stories that have like been born out of multiple ideas all at once. So,
but maybe that's kind of like what I was saying earlier, how like you guys, I was being a little cheesy, but at the same time, like I feel like I don't have that many really good ideas. that I can just bounce around from one to the next. Like I want, like when I get a good idea, I want to stay with it and I want to make that story. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, and to be fair, and this kind of I guess goes into the next thing. I guess there's a difference between an idea and then something that actually has like legs under it or whatever. There's this premise and then there's the story. So as the book defines it, so I'll just use the example they gave. So Centaur Bounty Hunters is a premise. Like that is just like, or I don't know, like lesbian necromancers is a premise. But the story in this example, Centaur Bounty Hunters in Love, that actually has there's something happening. Something is happening with these characters. Or you can say lesbian necromancers who want to kill each other. That's a story. Like there's something actionable happening here. So how can you tell the difference between, or when do you know if the story idea is actually valuable and worth your attention? Like when do you feel like it moves from that point of being a premise into a story for you personally? I'm gonna start with LP on this one because I feel like your thoughts are gonna be interesting.
So, you know how she's like, go on 50 first dates with the idea, with the premise? Mm-hmm. I don't do that. I start writing. And in the writing, I find the thing that makes the thing a thing that works, which is like very, very pantserish. And I recognize that. But like, I'm not going to figure out what's going to work. Like, I'll figure out character stuff and setting stuff while doing it. I just have to make sure that when I hit it appropriately. I tried to write a story about sexually transmitted superpowers. And like, I was doing it in the context of like gay men cruising and it didn't work. And it didn't work until I put it into a support group. And I was like, oh, now this shit here has legs. So I might, and like, once I found that drilled down, I'm still working on this, but like, that's when the thing happened. So I can't plan too far ahead. Like, give me the premise. Let me sit down and try to find some things, and then the characters will come out of it, the setting will come out of it, and blah, 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 blah. But, like, I just have to go.
Okay. All right. Nick, how do you know when your story idea is valuable and worth your attention and is able to go from that premise into the actual story?
I think this is a good one. And this is going to be hard for me to answer because of how much I'm writing and having to produce on the fly with new stories for my masters here. I don't know if you feel the same, Marshall, so please chip in. But I feel like they're all worth it at a given point, right? And I'm going to say that because you bleed on the page. Once you're comfortable enough bleeding on the page and like really putting yourself out there, like I feel like every story is valuable to you because you're going to learn something either about yourself or about your writing, regardless of what's going to happen with that story. I think this is a trick question because if you look at valuable and attention seeking for stories that can I publish this or not, you've already lost. You're not going to write a good story if you're going that route. So for me, I'm going to go with all stories are valuable and worth my attention as long as I'm student seeking in that and learning from my own writing.
Okay. Yeah, I would agree with that, Nick. And I think depending on what you said early on, all the stories we are writing right now have to matter because otherwise we're not going to hit our deadlines because you've already committed to writing the story. You know what I'm saying? So it also depends on the context too. You know, in the publishing world too, if you've committed to a 3-book series and you've already written book 1, 2 and 3 have kind of fall in line. It's on somewhat, you know what I mean? Like, I guess I'm just saying like the story I have to write in the next few days is a horror comedy. Because I apparently just want to suffer for the next few days. And even my professor was like, that's going to be hard. But I have to commit to it and do it because I want to hit my deadline because I want to know within myself I can hit that deadline regardless of what the story is. You know what I'm saying? Because I've committed to it.
Okay, so y'all definitely took that in a different route that I was thinking, but it's interesting. I like it. Okay, before I say anything,
Did we
Will, what?
misinterpret the question?
No. Y'all did. Y'all did fine. I just was thinking of it in a different way. Y'all took it in another way. It's still valuable, no, regardless. Yeah.
Ask the question again.
So what I was saying is, how do you know when a story idea you have is valuable and worth your further attention? Basically, when it's moving from the idea phase into something that actually has legs and you want to work on it.
I think for me, it has to hit an emotional core. And the one that hits the emotional core the strongest is what I'm gonna start writing right away. Because you have a lot of times you have all these different ideas going on, and once you kind of start dabbling in each of those stories, you kind of figure, well, what's pulling me more? And usually for me, it deals with emotion or something I'm grappling with. So like all of 2020 and 2021, it was like being able to process grief in some type of capacity.
So yeah, so okay, so I think y'all kind of talked about it in a commercial way and also in like a creative craft way. So I thought it was interesting. Y'all took it the business aspect too, because
What were you
now I'm like I
thinking?
want to, huh?
Yeah, tell
Well,
us
how are
what you
you
were
thinking of the
thinking.
Yeah.
question?
No.
What's your answer?
I was thinking the creative way, but the craft way, but the way y'all took it was interesting too because that is important. Like, is it valuable? Like, should you consider market and publishing and business and all that when you're thinking if it's valuable or not? Because you're right. If you're contracted to something, like if you're on book 2 of a trilogy, I wonder what happens if you're on book 2 of a trilogy or something, and that's really not the story of your heart at the moment, but you got to sit your ass down and write that book 2 because you're contracted for it.
I feel like that's when writing is work, though. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah, for sure, yeah.
it's great to be able to write what you want to write when you want to write it, but the flip side of that is like, you know,
Yeah.
if this is not the book of your spirit in this moment, but you're contracted to write it, figure out how to do 750 words prints a day so you can hit that 3,000 words a day and get to 90,000 within a month. So that
Yeah.
rough draft is finished and you can come back to it.
Yeah. Look, I promise you I'm gonna have stories on that topic soon enough. But yeah, like yeah,
Hopefully me too.
that's why I found it interesting that y'all just brought it up because I was like, oh shit, I didn't even think about it in that respect. So yeah, no, that was good. I took it to the next another level here. All right, so kind of kicking it off, I guess now y'all guys are talking about what it takes for you to get the story running, get its legs and whatnot. So in the chapter 7, so the secret to storytelling, Charle Jane says is it's basically just one good scene after another, and then another, and then another. So she describes the scene as the basic unit of storytelling, and that as a general rule, what she has, a good scene is one where something changes, or at least something happens. So, I guess the question I want to ask based off of that, what are some scenes in fiction that you can think of that do this really well, that really fall in this definition of being like this basic unit of storytelling, but it kind of follows in the rule of it's one where something changes. It can be from anywhere in fiction, TV, books, video games, even. Will, you got one?
Yeah. So I love this question because I'm writing my webtoon right now, and every panel actually has to move the story forward. And for me, for an example of like a scene that really changes the story is the Dark Phoenix saga of when Jean goes in and annihilates that planet,
Yeah.
right? And it sends really rippled effects. And I think since I'm so right now, like writing my novel and then I'm switching to writing the script for the webtoon, it's really made me think about how each scene really needs to have like a gravity and makes it want to be pushed forward. and that, you know, you want to make sure that it just keeps your attention, the writer. Like, you want to actually like be like, this is great. So when I feel like I'm lagging right now on my novel, it's nice that I'm working on that script for the webtoon, because then it pushes my novel in a way, because I'm like, oh, I just need to visually see this. How would I visualize this so I can get something interesting or a moment that's interesting? So, Dark Phoenix Saga.
That's a good one. That is a good one. Any others come to mind? I have one actually. For me, and it's one of those scenes that I don't think I'll ever be able to get out of my head. Is when Wes shoots Annalise in How to Get Away with Murder in season 2, at the end of season 2, and at the end she's saying his real name, and then it was like, wait, what the? Not only is this woman she got shot by this guy that she's been protecting, but all of a sudden she says his real name, and it was this culmination of all this shit where it's like, to me, it was such a perfect scene because not only did it change everything, but it resolved so much at the same time. And I've always been like, this was so freaking well done. It was like, he figured out that old girl had been dead the whole time. He figured out she had been lying to him. And then, you know, and it's like all this tension, all this, and it just pops. And then even after you feel like all this stuff got resolved, it throws one more screwball at you. So I always think of that scene as just like this really perfect encapsulation of like how to tie everything together and still keep the story moving forward in an unexpected way.
I've been watching a lot of TV lately. And I guess I want to go back to something I haven't really watched in a little bit because I haven't finished it yet. But does anybody watch Only Murders in the Building? Does anybody watch that?
No, I heard of it though.
So what I love about it is it's a kind of meta mystery that centers around people doing a podcast and also solving a mystery as they do it. And it's Martin Short and whatever. And it's amazing. But the cool thing about it is the scenes are phenomenal. And there's always something that shifts with the character or something every single time. And at the end of the episode, there's always like that, oh shit kind of thing that puts a twist on everything that makes you have to watch the next one. And that's kind of like a good... Shows like that are really good to see this thing kind of play out in a visual way, which I think all of us are giving examples of anyway. And I just realized LP was trying to talk and he was muted, and then I talked over him. Is that what happened?
Well,
you didn't talk over me because you couldn't hear me. There was no way. You're good. It's fine.
I wasn't even looking. I was just like, I'm going to say things. Anyway, go ahead.
No, I was looking. I didn't see him either because I was like looking right at you. But yeah,
it's all good. We're fine. Yeah, Charle Jane talks about how the CW is like perfect for seeing how a scene can work on so many levels at the same time. And baby, I mean, it's cute and everything. Lord knows I'm a CW child, but How to Get Away with Murder will actually, like, if you want to take because like there are other Shondaland shows, there's Grey's Anatomy, there's Scandal, which are great, but there is you can't do something else and watch How to Get Away with Murder.
No,
you have
literally
to like focus.
You have to focus because there's like moving pieces, and it's not just like one episode. It's like literally the entire stuff from the whole season, and it'll call back stuff from 2 seasons ago and bring it forward. And it's like you got this,
you can't. Yeah, that's my prescriptive thing. Go watch How to Get Away with Murder from the beginning. Actually, don't watch it from the beginning. Watch the last episode to the first episode. And see if you can piece it together.
Because like literally, it's one of the few shows that I think, for me as a writer, where I never felt like I knew what was going to happen. Like I always, with a lot of other shows I can watch and be like, I enjoyed it, but I kind of saw it coming. Like that show, I think is a real masterclass of how to use scenes to not only play with, to push things and make things happen, but to play with audience expectations and so on and so forth. And I don't want to go on the diatribe because I could talk about that show forever. So anyway, did anybody have any other scenes that came to mind for them as like kind of like perfect works of like?
I do, and I hate bringing this up, but it's George R. R. Martin, Game of Thrones. Spoiler alert! It's when Jon Snow dies. Like, it changes the complete landscape of that entire series. And then they do it again when Jon Snow comes back to life. I mean, that's really resonating with what I'm reading right now and what I'm watching. So, like, I don't recommend George R. R. Martin. Too rapey for me and a lot of his stuff and demeaning to women. So I don't recommend him. However, this is a good piece. And it's a great scene.
You made me think of another great scene though. As soon as you said it, the scene when Cersei got hers, well not got hers, but when she when she blew that church right on up.
Oh my gosh.
That scene was perfect because it was so calm in a lot of it. A lot of it was so calm and just really measured and just built and built and built. And all of a sudden you lost and you didn't even blink because it didn't feel illogical at all, but you literally lost like 10 characters in one boom. Like it was just like boom, done. And everything changed. And it was so well done.
Oh, absolutely. And when you asked this question, I kept thinking death scenes. What's a type of scene that really changes everything? Death scenes is all I kept thinking of. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah,
not to be morbid or anything.
My girl Marjorie, still justice for Marjorie, but that was a good one. All right, anyway, all right, so we talked about scenes. So one of the things after the scene, because if the scene's the basic unit, then the next thing that's kind of like what you have to kind of like figure out in telling your story is how to make it powerful, right? Everyone wants their story to have some kind of impact or, leave someone feeling something at the end of it. And one of the most powerful ways that Charle Jane talks about to make that happen is to show how people change. And I love how she says that fiction is superior to real life because we can actually show change happening in real time. Like, we all know that relative that has been the same the entire life and they're stubborn as hell. They're never going to change no matter what's been put in front of them. Well, you don't really have to deal with that person in fiction necessarily. So, but what I wanted to do is kind of like do a flip of the previous question where instead of asking about stories where you've seen powerful change in characters, I want to hear about stories where you feel like the character change was completely unearned and it did not work. All right, Marshall, I saw that head go quick.
I was hoping you were going to ask that question because I had an example for both and it was kind of the same. So while I was sick, which is why I missed the last thing, while I was sick, I watched Infinity War and Endgame back to back in the same night. Okay. What always gets me about Endgame is the beginning when Hawkeye loses his family. That to me is like that moment of he's like calling for his family. And I'm just like, dude, like that hits hard as a father. Right. Then he goes full Ronin and starts killing hella people. Right.
Okay.
When it didn't feel all the way earned because I was with him, I was like, I get you're mad. But then eventually it takes him years to catch up with him, or 3 years to catch up with him. And then Black Widow shows up and was like, come with me. And he's like, don't give me hope. But that was enough to like, and everybody forgives him. I feel like everybody was just like, dude, we're just going to forget that you killed probably 1,000 people. Right.
Because those people of color.
but that's my, so you know what I'm saying? It wasn't, I know. It didn't sit well on a lot of levels. And I'm watching it laying on this floor. I'm just like, I don't know. I like Hawkeye just fine, but I don't think he should be this forgiven this quickly. You know what I'm saying? So
no, absolutely. Yeah, no, I totally get you guys. And I don't know if you watched not Netflix, the Disney Plus show. I feel like they tried to get to that.
They tried.
Okay, well, I think you were going to talk about it. So,
go ahead, Will.
Yeah.
Well, I was actually going to talk about Andor because it made me think about how quickly we forgave Darth Vader. And it made me think about watching Obi-Wan. And I think, there's still, and how he, got to go to the light side of the Force. Which, granted, I think Divinity, you kind of think of it as they're more forgiving than maybe humanity. But I still think like there would be so much more to forgive because Luke and even somewhat Leia were forgiving of Darth Vader, but what about all the rest of the people that suffered under the Empire? And I think Andor really hits it on the head. They really show the ugliness of what the Empire did to indigenous people of that planet. I don't know if anyone's watched it so far, but there's these strong themes in it like that.
I've only watched the
Yeah.
first couple episodes, so I don't want too many spoilers. But I'm with you on the Vader thing, because I feel like Luke is like forgiving Vader, but we also need to not forget that early Vader and late Anakin killed millions and millions of people, right?
Well, and I think also when you think of Leia, because even Leia in the Legends books and the books that are now canon, she's not as forgiving because she
Right.
knew the people who were. She knew the people that were suffering under the Empire. And it's not that Luke didn't, but Luke is coming from a very naive place.
Yep.
You know, and while he can forgive about Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru because he feels like there's still good in my father, he doesn't have the same type of life experience that almost everyone who was under the Empire had. And specifically, when you think about it, his sister, Leia, where she saw the atrocities of the Empire, her whole planet was destroyed because of him. And she sees all these things. So as the story goes on, she's not so forgiving of him. She has a complex feelings towards it.
Yeah. Actually, I'm glad you brought that up because that was going to be mine's, but from a different point of view. I know this is probably going to be controversial, but I just felt Luke and his turn in Last Jedi was so unearned and not built up in a way that felt believable to me because I'm like, this is literally the guy who did not give up on his father, who he knew had done all these things and terrible things and still was like, I believe in him. There's still good in him. There's still good in him. And all of a sudden you have a bad dream about your nephew and you're ready to kill him. Like it didn't resonate. It didn't feel earned. It felt completely out of character. And also too, it felt out of character and unearned to me that he would abandon his sister. There was nothing I had seen that would make me think, oh, he's going to run from his sister or leave her alone. Like everything that story had given me up to that point was like, no, he has his sister and he's not leaving her. So I know the movie's controversial. I know people have their opinions on it, but that particular element of it for me was very hard to swallow, and it did ruin a lot of it for me.
You know, real quick on that one point, Brent, I agree. Because really, like, I feel like if you really looked at who the chosen one was, it was Leia. She was the one who never got to the dark side. She was the one.
Never once.
She was the one who didn't give up. And she was the one, even when the Empire was supposedly dead, she kept on the lookout. She was still looking for things because she didn't believe that it was happening. You know, and she knew people were after her kids and that they were being targeted. So I feel like in a lot of ways, she channeled the Force and for diplomacy and for being resolute. So I think Luke was a little bitch.
Well, and that's why I didn't buy him like running. Like I never bought him running. Like
exactly
running from her.
I think don't you feel like that's the thing that the movies got wrong is like they needed to have the four of them, and I'm including Lando in it, really be together in that first film to then do a send-off to the next generation to give those people the courage because they were the leaders of the old rebellion.
And even and while I guess we're on top of that, even like Han's thing in The Force Awakens felt weird and unearned to me too, because I'm like, this man came out of where he was at before. He was wasn't he an admiral or a general or something by the end of it?
Yeah.
So I felt, and probably this is the problem I think sometimes when you hand your story off to too many people who don't necessarily get the core of it or who don't necessarily agree with how each other's telling the story. And I think that's how you end up with these disjointed character moments or this growth that doesn't feel earned. Whereas something like, I feel like Avatar The Last Airbender, because it was so much in control by the same creators, they had a vision, they stuck to it, and they were able to build that character growth that I guess felt very satisfying and very earned. Like Zuko, if they had misstepped even one misstep with Zuko's journey, I think it would have felt wrong. They literally landed every possible moment they could with him.
I mean, I think too with Zuko is like early on, because of the contrast of Uncle Iroh, you knew that he was a good kid who was in pain, and I think that's what they did so brilliant with that character is that, there was a coreness of you see good actions, even though he's angry. And even though he is, going down a darker path at the time, his uncle's like right there, like trying to show him the light. I mean, that show's brilliant. They were great writers.
But more than that, Zuko is misguided, right? Like his world is built around a worldview that his father propagated, but like he's out in the world dealing with the world as well as responses to him based on his father. And like the more he sees, the less he believes. The more he sees, the more disenchanted he becomes. And so in that way, he's giving full story arc that, Aang is cute and all, but like, I don't think Aang's arc is flatlined.
It's a bit weaker compared to some other characters, but I think it's still there, but
it's okay to love a flat character. It's fine.
Yeah. Well, sometimes it's good to have it's like, to be there to like let the others be doing their thing or whatever.
I would go as far as saying that Zuko is the only one who had a circular arc situation versus this just like cardiac line going on. Because you get a Katara episode from time to time and a what's the goofy one's name? You get an episode about him every so often, but like. Yeah, Zuko is the only person who like changed over the course of the series, in my opinion.
Now I'm thinking like
Well, I mean, I think Sokka did have somewhat of a change where he was this goofy character. Well, by the end, I think the sense of maturity and weight was coming in on him. I still think he was light and carefree, but I do feel like he was a little bit more mature by the end of the series. But Zuko definitely has the biggest change.
For sure, absolutely changed. Yeah, I mean, I think in the case of Aang though, I don't think I would have wanted him to change. I think that's what makes him work is that he remains the same pure kid that he was to start with, despite all these horrible things that he's encountered over and over again. He still chooses to hold on to who he is and not falter in that. So I think that in a way is his own arc too. Maybe not an arc of change, but yeah. Anyway, but I did have one more bad one. I was just thinking about it as we were talking. Spike. God, the whole him getting a soul and all of a sudden becoming a sort of pseudo good person. Absolutely. Not that I look back on him, but absolutely horrible. Absolutely horrible. And the cheap shot of, he has a soul, as if people with souls ain't out here chopping people up and committing murders and not caring about it. Like now that I'm like older and can think a little more about it, I think we didn't use the concept as a soul as this cheap plot device. And Spike's growth was just even him sacrificing himself at the end before Angel brought him back was just it didn't feel earned in any way.
So I didn't watch a lot of the interior episodes. I graduated from high school the same time that Buffy graduated from high school. And so I would try to dip in, but I never knew what the fuck was going on. But I did catch the last season as the last season aired. And like there were references into last season with things that Spike had done, like the attempted essay. And I was just like, okay, y'all, like what in the world could Spike actually do that would make this a redeemable anything? Excuse me.
Didn't buy
it. And then they wanted to bring him back for Angel, and I was just like, okay.
I feel like he was more suited for Angel than he was for Buffy by that point. But yeah, Will, I saw you had your hand up.
Yeah, I'm. I'll tell you something off mic, but I can say this on mic. Um, Sarah has been Sarah Michelle Gellar has gone on record saying that that whole season 6 with Spike and her relationship, she got into screaming matches with Joss Whedon because she so deeply disagreed with it.
There's a couple of things I've heard about that. That particularly, it's probably more of an off mic thing too, because I don't know if we want to talk about
I
this.
have off mic stories too.
Yeah, so we'll probably come back to
So
it.
in lieu
Okay,
of off
mic
mic stories,
we'll move on. Yeah, because I
it's
heard
about
some
time to
things.
wrap this one up too. So let's talk about the endings. See?
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah, see, yeah. We actually do. I do have one more question. It'll probably take us to the end here. So there's some things that we got to talk about endings here. So there's some other stuff in the book that talks about pantsing and plotting, but I didn't want to get into that. So if that's your thing, pick up the book. You can get to it. So how to tell? Let me make sure I get into the end here. The ending is the beginning. Charle Jane says, when she was writing, she tried to write one story a week. That's a lot of endings, so I don't know if I don't know if I can recommend that. But anyway, there's a particular section in here. Sorry, I lost where it was at. Okay, so 7 things that she learned about endings. I'll just cover them really quick. A good ending doesn't have to be a surprise or a twist. You don't have to answer every last question as long as the characters find some resolution. Likewise, you don't have to tie off every conflict with a bow, especially if the reader can easily see how things will turn out. Denouement gives you a chance to wrap up some of the emotional questions in the story after the main conflict has been put to bed. An ending pays off if it addresses the things that you told us over the course of the story that we should care about. 7 words sum up a really good landing. Nothing will ever be the same again. Okay, so those are 7 things that Charle Jane says she's learned about endings.
There's one more.
Wait, did I miss one? Oh, shit. Sorry.
Next page.
Thanks for catching me on that.
I just happen to have it in front of me.
Last one. I was thinking it was all on the same. Okay, your final sentences are like the last note in a freaking symphony. That's actually pretty good. Okay, so what I'm gonna ask each of you is, what has your own writing up till now taught you about endings? So I'm gonna start with Marshall on this question.
Yeah. So right now we're writing short fiction in one of our classes, and so I'm writing a lot of endings, and I'm keeping in mind too the ending that I have for my novel that I've already not written, but outlined. But one of the things we've been studying a lot and talking a lot about is basically number 5. An ending pays off if it addresses the things that you've told us over the course of the story that we should care about. And it's about keeping that promise, you know what I mean? And it's about keeping, and that ties in, and we're talking really short fiction this week, flash fiction, but what are you hinting at and promising at the start of the book, of the story? And is that paid off at the very end? And if it's not, it's going to leave this reader unsatisfied. So that's something I've been really focusing on. I really like first lines and I really like hooks of stories, but I know I'm not sticking the landing like I should. So that's what I've been really hyper focusing on right now, is making sure that I have basically wrapped up what I promised at the very start. And again, some of those other things, like, not everything has to be with, tied off with a neat bow. The easy things to figure out, but those major promises that in the very beginning of a story is what I definitely have to pull off. Otherwise it doesn't work.
Okay. All right. Nick, what has your own writing up till now taught you about endings?
Yeah, so I mean, same boat as Marshall, right? I'm writing lots of endings right now, but what I'm learning where like I could be better at in shorter fiction. I'll say that because I do struggle with shorter fiction and making it feel like it's a short story, not a larger portion of a book. But bookending your promise. And that's something I'm learning this week with flash fiction and stuff like that. Your opening words, your opening sentence and things like that is your promise, and bookending. And what does that mean? Repeating the same thing at the end to close it full circle. And I think in my writing, that's what I haven't been doing with the short stuff. So clearly what I was doing was not working. And now I think I found something that will work based on the examples that I've been reading lately.
All right. So LP, same question. What has your own writing up till now taught you about endings?
That they're fucking hard. You know, the promises thing, I don't have as much trouble with like the main promise of the story. It's the smaller promises sometimes that I don't necessarily pay attention to, and I'm working on that. But more than anything, like I can get to an end of a story or end of a version of the story and then I have to think about, so what would make this more poignant? What would make this stickier and more resonant? And so that's a consistent conversation that my writing has. But like, I think I can do that. I think I've got that. I think the hardest part for me, more than anything, because I get to less endings because of how many things I start, I'm really kind of honing in on how to really make those land more than anything else. Also thinking of sections as endings, chapters as endings, or page breaks as endings, like creating something that either has a twist, a knife turn, an answer to a promise, like something that makes people feel resolved, but also pulls them forward. These are the things I think about. I might not answer the question.
I like that.
No, you did. You did.
Okay.
You answered it. I was thinking of Arm and Indigo as you were talking about this, though. You very much answered big and small promises in that story in a way that felt satisfying and all came together at the end. I'm not saying that just because
Indigo because I wrote that story in a month. I do not like Clarion because I wrote a bunch of stories in 6 weeks. But like, if I can get somewhere in between there, maybe like I can finish this short story collection. So we'll see.
I think you got it. You got it. All right. Well, for your own writing, what has your own writing taught you about endings?
Wrap everything up. I need to wrap everything up. Sometimes I'm like, oh, well, I'll leave a couple things like, not resolved. But you kind of have to choose what things you can't have resolved and what things you definitely need resolved. And so that always makes me go back to my beginnings, because sometimes I think my beginnings are overly packed, right? So I have to go through and be like, okay, I need to take this out and leave it for either book 2 of something, or I need to write something else kind of with that. It's like I try to put like everything that's in the kitchen in like a closet, and I need to take some stuff out of the closet to like make it look orderly. That's what I've learned.
Yeah.
Right, bring us home, Brent. What you got?
Yeah, I gotta say, I've learned that that sometimes it's you say Father Time. I was literally about to talk about the horror story I had to just turn in recently. That was centered around time, and I guess I learned in that one that it is okay to let the emotion be the end and not necessarily the plot be the end. Because I think I've always focused on like plot. It has to end. Everything has to every little plot point has to be addressed. And to Charle Jane's point, I think it was number 2. You don't have to answer every question. So that's something I've had to learn with my own writing. Is just like I don't have to answer every question. And the thing I've learned is that sometimes by answering every question, you have a very mechanical ending. It feels like you're checking off a checklist when you read it back. So I'm trying to learn that it's okay to let let stories have emotional closure and not necessarily always plot closure. If that makes sense.
Indeed. So
yeah,
we're going to come back to section 3 at some point, right?
Yes, section 3.
Section 3 will be released at the end of November, everyone, so you can catch up, start reading, and go into our show notes and join our Discord so you too can talk more about Never Say You Can't Survive by Charle Jane Anders.
Yeah, because there's a lot we didn't cover in the book. Like there's a whole thing about pantsing and plotting and how that neither of those distinctions matter and blah, blah, blah. We didn't do all that. So there's a lot more in the book. You should read it. Charle Jane is just throwing out a wealth of knowledge, so it's really hard to cover all of it in an episode. But yeah,
And people,
check it out.
people have been digging these episodes, so and the conversation definitely continues. So jump in the Discord for sure. And this has been Just Keep Writing, a podcast for writers by writers to keep you writing. You can find us at justkeepwriting.org. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Feel free to reach out to any of us on our social medias, and please jump in our Just Keep Writing Discord channel. Links to all of that is in the show notes. Lastly, please support our show by going to patreon.com/justkeepwriting. We offer daily writing prompts, early access to podcast episodes, and much more. Thanks for listening, and just keep writing.